It's college football season, which means you need the unbeatable coverage of Sling starting at $35 a month. Sling has all the big games on all the biggest channels like ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3, SEC Network, ACC Network, Fox, Big Ten Network, Pac-12 Network, and the Longhorn Network, all for the best price. You can stream on any device, record up to 50 hours with your included DVR space, and pause or change your service at any time. Check out sling.com for special offers. Sling, the live TV you love at a price you'll love. Try it today. Welcome to the Andy Staples Show presented by Sling. What a day. Nicole Auerbach. Alabama, Texas feels like it was 5 months ago.
Yeah, that was earlier today, which is wild. I woke up today thinking that Baylor BYU might be the only good game that we get on this week 2. And it was a bananas day. I tweeted about this, but there were so many staggered start times. So it just felt all day like you were just going from one crazy thing into the next crazy thing into the next crazy thing, which actually was how the day went. But they're like all the finishes were a little bit different, a little bit staggered. So I just feel like that created this idea and this feeling that something crazy was happening somewhere in the country at any given moment throughout the day on Saturday, which actually is basically a good summation of what happened.
I mean, I had to make a list just to make sure I remembered everything, and I still probably left some things out. But let's just go down the list now before we really get into meaty discussions of each topic. But Appalachian State beats Texas A&M. Marshall beats Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman is now 0-3 to start his coaching tenure at Notre Dame. Yes. Alabama survived Texas. Washington State beat Wisconsin. Iowa State beat Iowa 10-7. The under hit. Woohoo! Under. Oh, by the way, that Alabama surviving Texas. Yeah, they didn't cover, so now I have to chug mustard later this week. Nicole, you'll be with me and Ari when we do that.
I will, but I think you're secretly excited about that. But always bet the Iowa under. I can't even believe that they put some of these numbers with some of these Iowa games. But okay, what else happened?
Kansas wins on the road in overtime in Morgantown. Wait.
They sure did. 1-0 in Big 12 play.
Clay Helton, and remember, Clay Helton finished week 2 a year ago getting smoked by Stanford and then getting fired by USC. He took Georgia Southern to Lincoln and won.
That was maybe one of the wildest games in a wild day. The Sun Belt East, man, it's just a murderer's row.
Seriously, why would you schedule a Sun Belt team at this point? What is North Carolina's like? I can't believe we went 2-0 against Sun Belt teams. Like I'm tempted to vote North Carolina number 1 because they've gone on the road to Sun Belt places the last 2 weeks and won.
Well, I mean, they're clearly, I mean, of course they were already kind of exhaling about giving up 40 points in the fourth quarter to App State and surviving to tell the tale. But after what they just did to Nebraska, the likely final nail in the coffin for Scott Frost. I mean, that game was just otherworldly. 600 something yards of offense on Nebraska's defense, just absolutely a crazy game. It was super back and forth, very fun, but also, man, I mean, it's just like every single week I just feel so bad for Nebraska fans. And it was just silent. The second that they scored at the end, it was silent.
I went back and rewatched it because I covered the Florida-Kentucky game, which is another game we need to talk about because Kentucky has a win streak against Florida.
Sure do.
Most of my life, they didn't even win once against Florida. And now they've won twice in a row.
Well, and we're going to get into that further because obviously you're covering that game. But the way Kentucky won that game, too, I thought was really impressive. I mean, they were just awful on special teams. They were down early. It kind of felt like there were a couple moments where it could have gone south real quick. Yeah, really remarkable. And I also felt for Anthony Richardson. He was so good a week ago. He struggled so much against Kentucky. Yeah. And it sounds like he put a lot of that blame on himself. So we'll get into that game further. But yeah, that's not even the headliner.
No, there are a couple game plays we'll talk about in that game that it was just it changed everything. But what is the headline? That's the question. Is it Appalachian State beating A&M? Is it Marshall beating Notre Dame? Is it? I mean, that's it for Scott Frost, but his buyout doesn't drop till October 1st. So what do you do? I have to look at his contract because I know a lot of these guys' contracts say they have to serve as the head football coach, or you have to pay them their full buyout. Because couldn't you reassign him to be like a janitor for the next few weeks and then fire him when the buyout drops, unless his contract specifies otherwise?
Here's my question on Scott Frost. They're doing this, right? We know the buyout goes to $7.5 million. Basically, they're saving $7.5 million.
Correct. It drops in half
this year.
Yes.
Is it worth $7.5 million to make a change this week? Because your fan base is
the
that
Big Ten's got a lot of TV money coming in, Nicole.
I feel like it is something to consider. I mean, obviously, if you didn't have this 3 weeks from now, we would have probably already seen a change. But there's nothing moving in a positive direction there. And I'm not usually super a proponent of midseason changes, but I just can't see how you're supposed to go even 3 more weeks with Scott Frost now. It's just so toxic. You lose the same way every single time. And it's got to be so frustrating. I mean, this is an entire stadium that cheered. They cheered when the touchdown got taken off the scoreboard because they could help them run clock. That didn't even run enough clock, didn't even allow them to win the game against Georgia Southern. I mean, that just must be so frustrating to be a Nebraska fan.
More frustrating, Nebraska fan or an Iowa fan. We've got Vaughn in the live chat. How much longer can Iowa keep this up? Phil Parker, the defense coordinator, LeVar Woods, the special teams coordinator, and tight ends coach, who, I mean, that's a pretty good combo at Iowa, deserve way more than this, the way they've operated defense, the way Woods is recruited. He's not wrong. Like, okay, if you had to make a change tomorrow, what's the more pressing change that you would need to make? Scott Frost as the head coach at Nebraska or Brian Ferentz as the offensive coordinator at Iowa?
Okay, I feel like they're very equal, and it might be more frustrating to be an Iowa fan in this situation because you know that you can't ever make a change there, right? Like, until Kirk Ferentz decides to retire, he's not going to fire his son. So
Bobby Bowden fired his son, and then he hired Jimbo Fisher. Like, it can be done.
Okay, well, it doesn't feel like it's going to be done. I think that in this situation, you have faith in Trev Alberts and Nebraska that they're going to make a change because they've been very clear. Hey, we are setting this whole thing up, Scott Frost. You have to make all of these assistant coaching changes. You have to shift these things because if it doesn't work, it is on you. And we are giving you a longer leash than we would give with anyone else, literally anyone else. So this is on you. And they would be willing to make a change. I think that's what's really tough about Iowa is it's more painful than it was last year. It is remarkable that this team won 10 games last year. Like, it is a crowning achievement. It is a feat. Clearly, this team is struggling if the defense doesn't physically score points for them. That is just the problem. And to not even make a quarterback change in this game, Matt Campbell has not beaten Iowa. This was his first win in the rivalry. Iowa State made it very, very painful down the stretch. Like, they did not make it easy on themselves. And they still won. They still won in a rivalry that has been very lopsided lately because Iowa did not score except for the first possession. They blocked a punt and had a super, super short field. That was it. Like, that is the most, that has got to be so frustrating because if you just had an average offense and not one of the worst offenses in the country, imagine how many more games you'd win. You'd obviously win this game. I mean, I think defensively and special teams, they're elite. They're elite in 2 of the 3 phases, but you can't not even be average offensively and expect to win games.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Scott Dockerman will be on with us on Tuesday's show. And I swear I'm not going to always bring him on to talk Iowa, even though he's our Iowa beat writer. He's very well versed in all other things as well. But we're going to have to talk about that again because I just it blows my mind. I covered that 2013 Florida team that they had some quarterback injuries and became completely just incompetent on offense, and they had an elite defense. And you thought, like, it felt by the end of the season like the defensive players just wanted to punch all the offensive players in the face. So I'll be curious to see how that chemistry wise goes down. But speaking of places where the defense looks fairly good and the offense looks fairly awful, let's go to College Station, because Jimbo Fisher is getting paid a lot of money. They have all these great recruits. They're supposed to ascend. This is maybe this year, maybe next year. They can't move the ball. The quarterback Jimbo Fisher chose, Haynes King, does not appear to be an effective quarterback.
This is also a very frustrating team to watch, and I feel for the fan base, because they were thoroughly outplayed by App State in this game. I mean, almost not even 200 total yards of offense. I mean, they were just, the third down conversions, terrible. Time of possession more than doubled. I mean, App State fully dominated this game, deserved to win. It wasn't close. They were the better team. And listen, I went to Michigan. I had my very first game as a college football audience member was App State beating Michigan. I am well aware that this is a good program, that this has been a good program, that this program has beaten a lot of different teams at a lot of different levels. But to me, this is a team that almost beat North Carolina last week. You know they're good. They've been good.
You shouldn't be
they
surprised.
are not sneaking up on anyone. You're not sneaking. Yeah, you shouldn't be surprised. And I just thought, Chase Bryce, you knew that you had a quarterback who's had experience at multiple Power 5 programs. Like you knew what you were walking into, or what they were walking into at Kyle Field.
Yeah, Chase Bryce, by the way, Chase Bryce saved Clemson's national title season in 2018. I don't know how many people remember that, but he came into the Syracuse game when Trevor Lawrence got hurt and saved the national champion. He ain't scared of you and yell leaders and a collie that has a phone number.
Can I say too, one thing that I thought was really cool was after the loss last week, which was, again, one of the most painful possible ways for App State to lose that upset bid, Sean Clark made a point in his postgame to talk about Chase Bryce and say, like, this kid has a lot of heart. Do not have, the mistake at the end of the game. Do not hang that on him. Like, we love this kid. He's our guy. And there was this really, really cool moment on the field that the cameras captured of him and Chase Bryce embracing, being very emotional after this game. We saw Sean Clark being very emotional about what this win meant. I just thought that was really, really cool and a nice full circle moment from a week ago. But again, they were the better team from start to finish, and A&M just could not get anything going. And it's a huge problem. You only have the ball for 18 minutes in a game, and you just can't sustain anything.
Drake May carved up Appalachian State's defense. Like, 3 starts in, we know Drake May is a really good quarterback. You're Texas A&M, okay? You have access to all the great quarterbacks in Texas, and given the way you've been recruiting, all the great quarterbacks everywhere. How can you not get one that can carve up Appalachian State? North Carolina can.
How is it that A&M, we've seen them have like these, and this is true with Jimbo offenses, like great tight ends, and yet they always feel underutilized. Every time they have talented skill positions, they feel underutilized. We've had questions, and there's been some injuries at the quarterback position, right? But A&M is this team that there are jokes about them going 8-4, about them underachieving. When is it going to be the year? They have the talent. They paid all this money for the coach. They paid all this money for the resources, and it's just not improving. They're not getting better. You just, at what point do you have to say, like, something's got to change, either about the way you're running the offense, how you're calling the offense, how you're recruiting, something, because they're not winning games in the way that college football is won right now.
Well, and that's what, so I talked about this with Ari on the show this week. Aaron Murray, who I work with at SiriusXM on the SEC channel sometimes, he, like, Jimbo's offense, not the offense itself, but the way he coaches quarterbacks drives Aaron crazy. And I had not seen this until Aaron pointed out to me last year, and now I can never unsee it. Like, he makes sure to teach his quarterbacks they always have to have the ball right next to their ear as they're moving around in the pocket at all times. And if you try to walk around with your hands around a football like this, it's very awkward feeling. Now,
Maybe
watch
I'm just
Bryce.
going to do that all day tomorrow.
Yeah,
I'm just going to
there you go.
hold a football and walk around and
But
relate to Jimbo's quarterbacks.
Watch Bryce Young play, watch CJ Stroud play, watch all these quarterbacks in these other offenses that are very successful play. They're not doing anything so regimented. They're just flowing kind of naturally. Like if you watch Bryce Young at the end of the game against Texas, he looked super calm, natural, comfortable. The A&M quarterbacks never look comfortable, ever.
No. Can I transition here to another subject, which also would be maybe a headline story in any other week?
Yes, please.
JJ McCarthy seems to be the guy at Michigan. So you're talking about like who makes an offense look easier. I think that has become very clear through 2 weeks for Michigan, is that the offense is way more dynamic. It is way more explosive. It comes easier and looks easier for JJ McCarthy. And I know it was Hawaii. I understand that they have not provided much resistance to anyone they have played so far this year.
63-10.
You know what? Good for Vanderbilt. They started the season 2-0. They went into Wake Forest. Sam Hartman was back. But I get the level of competition thing. I get that JJ went in garbage time. They already had a comfortable lead against Colorado State. But I just think through 2 weeks in a competition that Jim Harbaugh kept open against inferior competition, so we would see this. It's become pretty clear that it's different. It's kind of like, again, we only saw it in very brief spurts, right, against Georgia Tech with Clemson. But the offense looked easier. It came easier to Cade Klubnik. Everything just moving forward didn't seem as difficult. And again, Cade McNamara won the Big Ten. Like that offense was functional. The ceiling is different. Also, Red is here in the background in case he is.
Hi, Red Auerbach. I heard him getting some treats. Yeah, but so I think you're right. And Ari and I talked about this when Harbaugh announced it. Our initial thought was he's decided JJ's the guy. And he has set it up this way so that when he decides JJ's the permanent starter, it won't come as a shock to anybody. And Cade McNamara will have gotten to start the season opener.
So I essentially believe that. I don't know necessarily that it was predetermined. But I think if you wanted it to be Cade McNamara, you handled the whole thing differently. I think he's your guy. You probably enter fall camp and you say that. I think by keeping this open, it became clear that there's separation and we all saw it. Like it became very public. It became very obvious. So it is easy with this amount of data for Jim Harbaugh to justify JJ being the guy. So I think that's where we are. And I get to Uconn next week. I get it. I think that some of this was only possible because of the way the schedule fell for Michigan. And maybe if you're playing, really good teams right out of the gate, you pick the more experienced quarterback and make him actually the starter. I just think that it's clear now. And again, I get the level of competition issue, but it is very clear that there is separation. I do think that is one thing that we learned on Saturday, and probably floated under the radars. There were crazy upsets everywhere else, but that is a fundamental, important development for the season.
No kidding. And as the Big Ten season goes on, could be a difference maker, because if the offense is easier for JJ, then everything should be easier for them. So speaking of making the offense look easy, let's talk about the game that was supposed to be the biggest game of the day, was supposed to be a blowout, was not. And that's Alabama and Texas. Alabama made everything look hard until really its last two offensive possessions, when Bryce Young reminded everyone, hey, I won the Heisman last year for a reason. Like I'm pretty good at this.
The 15 penalties, I think, were pretty alarming. That's so
Will Anderson late hit personal foul after he lined up offsides 3 times. It was like, what the heck? Because that's a guy who just does not make many mistakes.
I was worried about him because he was such a favorite of the athletic staff in our straw poll last year. I was worried he's going to lose our Heisman vote based on some of these dumb mistakes.
He had a nice sack at the end of the game.
He did. But yeah, I think it was Bryce Young saved that game. He saved Alabama. You could tell that the way that Nick Saban was talking about him after the game that he realized that. I was surprised. They were just uncharacteristically undisciplined. And I did not think that they were the better team. And that's really like what it was just in some of these games, even ones like this one where the result didn't go the way that the game felt and they truly escaped with a 1-point win. Texas looks good. Like you're seeing them take these steps. And obviously Quinn Ewers got knocked out of the game, but they were right there. They could have won it. There were multiple situations where they should have had extra points on the board, should have had a bigger lead. And I still am a little confused about the safety getting taken off because I still think it was a safety in that situation. I know they ruled it an incomplete pass.
No, that one was baffling to me. They screwed it up from the jump. It should have never been called roughing the passer. That was where they screwed it up.
Didn't they rule? They said targeting.
Well, targeting actually allowed them to correct their mistake because you're not actually supposed to be allowed to overturn the roughing the passer, but they came up with some fakakta excuse as to why they could overturn it because they went to review the targeting and realized, one, it wasn't targeting, and two, it wasn't roughing the passer. But the ball hitting Overshown's helmet was what messed up everything else. Because, yes, it was probably intentional grounding, which would be a safety. But the ball hit the helmet, so you don't know if it was headed toward a receiver in the area. It did not reach the line of scrimmage, but the ball hit the helmet.
Okay. I'll accept it briefly. There were other situations in that game where Texas should have had a bigger lead, should have had points on the board. They missed a field goal. There were other turning points and missed calls in the game. But I did think that Quinn Ewers, who, again, I know he had like a perfect recruiting score. Like I know he was coming in with amazing amounts of hype, but I thought he lived up to it. I mean, he looked great. He looked so good. And I just thought there was a toughness, there was a physicality to Texas. There was just a lot of things where I know Texas fans don't want moral victories, and that's not what I'm saying this was, but there's so much to be excited about that probably you haven't been excited about if you're a Texas fan. And I thought Quinn Ewers and what he looked like when he was in that game, when he was healthy, is absolutely number one on that list. That was, speaking of a quarterback where the offense looks easy, that's what Quinn Ewers was.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I don't know. We're probably going to find out what his injury was here in the next few days.
Did he say like a bruised clavicle or something, which is a bone? So I don't think
it's the collarbone, and that's
what they said. Sprained. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably sprained AC joint. That all that stuff in that area. Joel Klatt said it right on the broadcast. I think he's had that injury because as soon as he saw him go down on his arm and have the weight of the defender hit him while his arm was stretched out, Klatt's like, oh, that's where that injury happens. And it sounds like he was pretty close to right. So I hope we get to see Quinn Ewers again this season. I thought Hudson Card did a good job. Now, he was banged up. He was hobbling around there. So, look, if Texas can play like that against UTSA and against Texas Tech and the other teams on their schedule, they're going to have a good season. The problem for Texas has been they get up for these games and they get up for Oklahoma, but they don't get up for anybody else. Get up for everybody, and you're going to be fine.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, think about when we think about like these coaches that have struggled or hot seat or seats that are heating up. It's literally about beating the teams that you're supposed to. And that's where it happens when Texas loses to Kansas or Nebraska losing to Georgia Southern and Northwestern and like all of these other teams. It's if Scott Frost had just beaten the teams that Nebraska is supposed to beat every single year, they would have been bowl eligible for now. But also you wouldn't have the same kind of narratives. And it's the same thing with Texas. If they can beat the teams they're supposed to, they'll be okay. They'll have a good season, especially if Quinn Ewers is healthy, which we hope he is, and hopefully he comes back.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful that he does because you've got a young offensive line that's going to get better. Their D-line's old, but it looked physical and had no problem with Alabama's offensive line today. They looked like a very good matchup for Alabama's offensive line. So Alabama really needs to develop some receivers. It's weird because we've gotten so used to Alabama being so loaded at receiver that watching them without an obvious first rounder at receiver is really odd. So, which I
and
mean, they went like 40 years between first round receivers before Julio Jones, and then it was just one after the other.
Well, I was gonna say, like, the weird part about getting so used to that so quickly too is we are also so used to this offense now, and like when Lane Kiffin helped modernize it, that wasn't that long ago, and now we're just taking for granted that they should be able to do all of these things in the passing game, and when they don't, it stands out. And I think you're absolutely right about like they've had multiple first round talent at receiver, or at least one, and to just not have that obvious guy. Again, Bryce Young won this game for them, and he's going to probably do that again. He won the Heisman, but it's just a very interesting dynamic, and I think the O-line wasn't what we're used to seeing out of the offensive line. There was just like multiple things, especially again the penalties, that just did not feel like we're used to seeing out of Alabama, which again, Nick Saban, uncharacteristic. And Nick Saban has been teeing off about the rat poison. Like, I kind of feel like he knew that this team wasn't the way that we all thought they were, and he's probably loving that they escaped with the win, but they have lots of things he can get on them about now.
Well, that was really similar to their Florida game last year, where they won by 2 against a team that was clearly not very good. So they came back from that and wound up winning the SEC. Hi, Red Auerbach. How are we doing?
Yeah, he's squeaking. I think he also thinks that, Alabama's got some concerns. He felt like he needed to chime in there.
But, absolutely. Well,
for everyone watching the video, you get to see the little guy.
That's right. When we come back, we got to talk about a head coach who's now 0-3. That's right. We're going to South Bend, where Notre Dame lost to Marshall. We'll be right back. It's college football season, which means you need Sling TV, where you can watch unbeatable college football coverage starting at just $35 a month. Get everything you love about college football, rivalries, marching bands, bowl games, conference power rankings, all of it comes with Sling. Plus, Sling has all the big games on the biggest channels: ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3, SEC Network, ACC Network, Fox, Big Ten Network, Pac-12 Network, Longhorn Network. That's right. I watched Quinn Ewers' debut on Sling. The best part is getting Sling is easy. It's easy to set up and even easier to use. You can stream on any device and record up to 50 hours with your included DVR space. Plus, you won't get locked into a long-term contract. So if you're looking for the perfect place to spend your Saturdays, you need to take a look at Sling, where you can get everything you love about college football for the best price. Check out sling.com for special offers. Sling, the live TV you love for a price you'll love. Try it today. You might have heard a few weeks ago when I was complaining that my wife pretty much immediately stole my soft, perfect Roback hoodie that I got when Roback decided to come on to be a sponsor. Well, I got another one, and it is the most amazing hoodie. And I have to keep it hidden so nobody else in my family steals it. But it is as great as I remember. And, oh, by the way, you probably should order 2 if you're going to order 1, because somebody's going to take it. Probably the same with any of Roback's stuff. The performance polos, hands down the best out there. They sent me one called the Florida Man. It's in orange and blue. It's got little states of Florida all over it. There's an Alabama version that's in crimson with some Alabamas on it. There's a Georgia version that's red and black with some Georgia state outlines on it. Yeah, I think Roback knows who they're talking to. They know their audience. By the way, they're also leading the NIL charge. They got Will Anderson, Bijan Robinson, and Michael Meyer helping them out this year, getting a little scroll in the process. Roback also has just started making their everyday shorts. I've got a couple pairs of these. You will want to wear them every day. They're very aptly named. So use the code Andy on roback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of the week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. 20% off all polos, hoodies, Q-zips, shorts, you name it. Just use the code Andy. Roback.com. Use the code Andy. Welcome back. Before we talk a little Notre Dame, some news from the Athletics' Austin Meek, who's at the press conference following the Michigan-Hawaii game. JJ McCarthy will start against UConn. That's right. Nicole got it. Boom.
Shocker. Shocker.
It's almost like it
And
was
you know
planned that way.
You know what? He's going to have a good day against UConn next week as well.
Yes. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Speaking of which, Jaron Hall having a decent day. He just threw a touchdown pass. BYU has taken a lead against Baylor. They'd been tied at 13 in the third quarter. So, and Mississippi State up on Arizona as they go to the half. So, yes, we're still watching the games because this day is never going to end. I don't think, Nicole. This is just wild. All right, let's talk South Bend. On any other day, Marshall, the Thundering Herd, going to South Bend and beating Notre Dame would have been the biggest story of the day, but it was not. Oh, Jaron Hall caught the touchdown. Look at that. I just assumed he threw it. This is what I get for reading the chat when I should be watching the game. So, well, all right. So Notre Dame now 0-2. Marcus Freeman 0-3 as the head coach. He says it starts with him, but this is when everybody was so happy. They acted like, okay, it's no problem that Brian Kelly left. We like this guy better. He recruits better. All the good assistants stayed with him.
Mm-hmm.
Are they still happy?
Oh, this is a tough one. Okay, so Marcus Freeman is 0-3 since becoming the head coach. And there have been very frustrating situations that happen in each of these games, right? Blown leads, kind of the way that things fell apart and they allowed Ohio State to take over in the second half last week. And then whatever this was, which was just putrid all around. I mean, they were getting pushed around by Marshall. Tommy Rees didn't call a great game. There were just a lot of reasons to be frustrated. I feel like it's tough because people are pointing out that Brian Kelly had some bad losses. But when he took over the Notre Dame program, it was in a totally different place. Like, there isn't supposed to be a drop off. And
right.
I think that that's where you can absolutely be concerned when you look at this team, when you look at like the weaknesses, right? If you look on the offensive line, or you look at like maybe what Tyler Buchner is as a limited quarterback and what his ceiling is. When you look at the fact that, yes, you have one of the best tight ends in the entire country, but that can't be your only offensive weapon because other people will then still beat you. Like, those are concerning parts about this and the way that they've lost some of these games. I get it. It's only 3, but no Notre Dame coach has ever started 0-3.
Yeah, and here's the other thing about Notre Dame. We haven't really talked about this, but this is something we should keep in mind. If Notre Dame falls back into Charlie Weiss, Ty Willingham level records, Notre Dame's going to have to join a conference. Like, Notre Dame has the luxury of staying independent because Notre Dame continues to be relevant. If they don't continue to be relevant,
you think they're gonna fall off and not be relevant? I don't know. I mean, even with like a transition
I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying they got to guard against that. So they got to get this fixed, whatever it is. You can't be losing to Marshall. Ohio State and Oklahoma State losses, fine. Like, those are very good teams. Understandable. But we need to start seeing what the Marcus Freeman era is going to actually look like. And maybe this is what it's actually going to look like. But my guess is it's better than this. You've seen the way they've recruited. They've got a very highly rated recruiting class coming in for the class of 2023. So perhaps this is just a little hiccup. And we've seen coaches start slow before. But like you said, this program was in a really good place when he took over. So it shouldn't be this hard. And if Buckner's not getting it done at quarterback, maybe you go to Drew Pine. I know he had to play at the end of the game because Buckner was banged up. If you don't think you have the quarterback, though, and this is something that
you got to get the quarterback.
You got to go get one, either through the portal or in recruiting. And like, this is like the Iowa thing. And I know Iowa tried to sneak, swipe a quarterback, get a transfer a little bit, but they didn't try that hard. And there were other quarterbacks who were actually in the portal that they could have tried to get. They didn't. Notre Dame, maybe you should have been looking around too. Now I realize transferring to Notre Dame is a little bit different story. That they don't have the luxury of being able to take everybody, but they've taken grad transfers like Jack Cohn before. So I don't know. It is strange to me. I liked Buckner's ability to run, and I thought that added a nice dimension to the offense. But if they're not going to be able to throw, you've got
Well,
to.
and he also can't be the only one who can run. I mean, this is part of the concern I think with the offensive line is people thought they would be a strength, or at least that it would not be a weakness. And so, and again, I think too, there's going to be questions, and Pete Sampson will do a great job parsing through the game that was called, right, and like the way that Tommy Rees played this game as well. I don't know. I also think that clearly this was part of a trend in a day where teams that we thought might be good entering the season kind of came back down to earth a little bit. Maybe we learned that there is more balance than just Power 5 versus Group of 5 and some of these like kind of, bright lines that we label people as, with the Sun Belt having 3 wins out of the Sun Belt East. So I think that there was a couple of different things that are going to end up kind of maybe overshadowing Notre Dame specific issues, which is to your point, that this wasn't the main headline of the day because of A&M, because of App State, because of all these other things that happened. But yeah, I think that, Notre Dame fans are, now we're 3 games into the Marcus Freeman era, and there are certain problems that have reared their head.
Well, let's talk about the commonality between 3 of the huge games that we're talking about, and that is the Sun Belt. This conference was number 10 out of 10 in the FBS not long ago. They have done an incredible job of making that league better, and they didn't do it in the way that everyone said you had to do it. Nobody was looking at TV markets. Nobody was looking at anything. The Sun Belt, when they were looking at potential new members, they asked one question: do your people care about football deeply? And if the answer was yes, then they took you. And you look at who they've added over these last few rounds of realignment: Georgia Southern, Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina joined. Now you've got Marshall. You've got James Madison coming in, which has been a great FCS program. Old Dominion, which beat Virginia Tech last week. I mean, and then you add, Louisiana Lafayette being very good over the last few years. Troy has had its years where it's been very good. This is a great league and a fun league.
Yeah, and Chris Vanini is in the chat, and he pointed out that all of the 3 big Sun Belt wins were former FCS teams and programs, right? That built
former FCS programs, yeah.
Great FCS programs. And Chris wrote about this too, Andy, when you were talking about like the way that they've built and added. They've also stayed very regional, which is also unusual in this day and age. And Chris wrote a story a few weeks ago about like getting rid of divisions, and people were thinking of this, and they were like, no, we're keeping our rivalries, we're keeping our regional ties. So I like that they think about this stuff differently. And like, these are programs. These are not flash in the pan places. These are programs that have sustained even when there've been coaching changes. Like, that's one of the more impressive things I think about App State, is how many different head coaches and different coaches who have come through Boone, and they've still stayed at such a high level and won at whatever level they're in. So like, these are programs that they have added, not teams that have had 1 or 2 good seasons. Like, there's clear investment and development that has endured. And these also have been places where like coaches have been able to have launching pads because they are successful, and then they stay successful, and then the next coach can be launched into a bigger job too.
That's exactly right. Let's move to the Big Ten and the Big Ten and the Pac-12, because Max Olson, our colleague, has said Washington State's going to be the most fun team to watch this year. They're actually not, like, I thought their offense would be a little more high powered than what we've seen against Idaho and Wisconsin, but Wisconsin's defense is usually pretty good. And the Cougs go in there into Madison and beat Wisconsin. Nakia Watson, former Badger, with 2 TDs. This transfer portal where somebody can just come back and bite you in the ass immediately is awesome. I love that part.
It adds a layer. Remember when coaches, were able to block transfers and they could block players?
Now Watson's been with Washington State since
schedule.
2021, so he was there last year. But yes,
but there were some coaches who would do it for like the entirety of that person's eligibility or like whatever, right? Like there was a lot of people who did not want this specific situation to have a possibility of happening. And we have seen it a lot. We have seen it happen quite a bit. We've seen quarterbacks do it. It's definitely adds a wrinkle. And I was so surprised by Wisconsin. Not that, again, I think they were picked in, want to say like the Big Ten Writers Poll or whatever to win the West. I didn't think that they were necessarily overwhelming favorites. I thought the West was pretty open. I mean, I think Minnesota's got a chance here, and Purdue nearly beat Penn State and could still factor in that West race. But
Iowa's defense and special teams have a chance that their offense doesn't. But
yeah, if they could, I tweeted about this. I was like, can they borrow a little bit of Nebraska's offense, and can Nebraska take a little bit of Iowa's defense? I think like both of those teams would be so much better.
Just fold the two teams in to each other.
I just think they need 10%, and I think they would win so many more games if they had 10% of each other's offense and defense. But like I thought that Wisconsin, again, you're still banking on Graham Mertz taking a step. You're still banking on certain growth. But I was surprised that they lost this game, even with those improvements and those plugins from the portal. I was very surprised by this result in Camp Randall.
Yeah, I thought Washington State would cover, but it was like a 17.5-point spread. I wasn't expecting them to go in there and win outright. But Jake Dickerson did a really good job. I mean, think about this.
Yep.
A year ago, Nick Rolovich was still the coach and was headed toward a firing over the COVID vaccination. And you were like, what's going to happen with these guys? Because they were playing pretty well before they fired Rolovich. And Dicker came in there, and I feel like they never even took a step back at all.
No, and he obviously won the job. I think that people probably would not have expected that if you had said this job was going to open. Who would get it? I think also they lost like half of their assistant coaching staff in that whole debacle as well. And so they were doing this understaffed and in like a very tense situation where I'm sure there were players who were upset about what had happened. I mean, there was just so much going on. So I agree. Remarkable job. Also, did you see that Incarnate Word also got a win on Saturday?
I did see that.
They were one of the. I was just going to say they were one of the two FCS over FBS upsets because there were upsets at every level of college football on Saturday. So you had Incarnate Word beat Nevada. You had Holy Cross beat Buffalo on a Hail Mary. It was crazy, but yeah, it was just like a very like Cam Ward day overall.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to see what they do in Pac-12 After Dark because I think they are going to be a lot of fun. Like Max Olson said, now we can talk before we talk about the game I covered. Let's go out west because Ari Wasserman has been texting me all night. We have this bet that I owe him $1,000 if USC makes the college football playoff in the next 3 years, and he owes me $1,000 if they don't. And
what are you guys
watched
doing?
Stanford game. What?
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but I'm going to win it, so I'm not worried about losing it.
Okay. All right, fair.
But he's convinced that because they put 40 up on Stanford, that no one's going to stop them all season, that they're just going to roll through everyone they play. I think Marshall Notre Dame had something to do with that too, but.
Well, okay. Actually, also, I just wanted to point out we did have a correction in the comments. There were other FCS over FBS upsets. Forgot to mention the 7 overtime game, Eastern Kentucky.
That's right. Eastern Kentucky. Go Colonels.
Weber State beat Utah State.
Pounded Utah State.
So transitive which we thought that they would take a step back. They won the Mountain West last year, but like they had certain transfers and seniors coming back last year's team. But transitive property makes us maybe a little bit more concerned with Alabama. Maybe if we're taking like Notre Dame's loss to make us more concerned about Ohio State. So there's some transitive property stuff. But I thought that USC's offense looked great. Caleb Williams looked great. They were super, super fun. I have some questions about the defense. I know they've had a lot of takeaways on the season, but like
Stanford's running right through them.
Yeah.
Listen, Stanford is not what they used to be. This is not the Stanford team that was dominating the Pac-12 a few years ago. So I need to see USC against some other teams before I'm ready to believe or have any fear whatsoever that I'm going to worry some money. I just don't. But now we do have to, unfortunately, Nicole, Ari and I got a little over our skis last week. We may have handed out a week 1 Heisman to Anthony Richardson. I think after what I saw in the swamp tonight, I'm going to have to repossess that. So we are going to do that when we come back. Let's talk about Athletic Greens. If you're looking to get better gut health, more energy, or a stronger immune system in a really easy, natural way, you've got to check out Athletic Greens. I'm sure you'll all agree that most of us are not huge fans of taking a handful of pills or vitamins in the morning. With Athletic Greens, you can get rid of all those extra vitamin bottles and finally make some room in your cabinet. Athletic Greens is an all-in-one solution that actually tastes good. You're going to enjoy getting your daily vitamins. So what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially heading into cold and flu season. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Andy Staples. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Andy Staples to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. That's athleticgreens.com/Andy Staples. Upside is a cashback app that enables people to get more value from their purchases and improves the profitability of local businesses so communities grow stronger. They partner with over 30,000 businesses and 25,000 gas stations across 48 states, plus the District of Columbia. How does it work? You open up your app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying, whether it's gas, food, groceries, you name it. You check in at the business and you choose which card you're using, or you can upload a receipt picture later, pay as usual, and then you get paid. The cash appears in your Upside account, and you can cash out at any time, either through a bank transfer, PayPal, or an e-gift card to Amazon, Starbucks, or dozens of other places. There's no limit to how much you can earn. It's super easy to use, and most businesses don't require you to upload receipts. You can just check in and then transfer the cash you've earned right after checking into your account. And this is real cash back. No points, loyalty rewards, ever shifting. You got to do this to get this. Nope. Yeah, users get real cash and they can cash out at any time. Upside also works with loyalty, cashback, and credit or debit card rewards programs. It's loved by businesses and users alike. Users are earning 3 times more cash back with Upside than with any other product, including loyalty programs and credit card rewards. Plus, sharing Upside with friends helps you increase your earnings. They'll get an extra 15 cents a gallon cash back the first time they use the app, and you'll get a one-time 15 cents per gallon bonus. You'll also earn a 1 cent per gallon for every gallon they buy forever. So give Upside a try. You're going to these places anyway. You're supporting local businesses. May as well get some cash back while you're doing it. Welcome back. Score update from Provo. Baylor has responded. Ben Sims with a touchdown catch. It is now 20-20. That game hurtling toward the finish, about 10 minutes to go. I don't know, Nicole, if we're going to make it quite to the end of that game, but I will put a tag on the show if we need to evaluate any craziness that might have happened. But let's talk about the game I was at tonight. I was in the swamp for Kentucky and Florida, and I guess unfortunately I'm going to have to rescind Anthony Richardson's Week 1 Heisman. He can visit with Kenny Hill in the Hall of Rescinded Week 1 Heismans. tough night for Anthony Richardson. It started out okay for Florida. Kentucky was making a lot of mistakes. Kentucky's offensive line was struggling to block Florida's defensive line. Will Levis took a couple big shots. There was Florida was gifted a safety when Kentucky's punter or long snapper sailed a snap over the punter's head. It looked for a minute there like Florida was going to be able to take control. What really turned around the game is in the second quarter, Jordan Wright, who's an outside linebacker for Kentucky, he missed last week with a suspension. He made one of the more incredible interceptions you will ever see because he was rushing Richardson. He was not in coverage. And so Richardson sees him, but figures he'll just kind of throw it over him, throw it through him. Wright reaches his left hand out and gets his fingertips on the ball and then squeezes. And suddenly the ball is in his hand. I don't know how that happened. We asked him after the game. He's not even sure how that happened. But he got it, and he ran and got tackled on the 6-yard line. Kentucky cashes it in for a touchdown. And it was a much different game after that. It felt like Anthony Richardson was rattled after that play. And there had been another play earlier in the second quarter where the hole had opened up nicely for Anthony Richardson. And he runs through the middle. Jaquez Jones, the Kentucky linebacker, is standing there and just drills Richardson, just puts him on his back. And the thinking, like when you watched him and it was like, oh, the Utah guys didn't do that. This was a really good Kentucky defense. Everybody was super pissed that Roman Harper had called them soft on the SEC network. And they were determined that no one would believe that after the game.
Yeah, I thought they were really impressive. Special teams, I have some questions about. And some of those snaps, you mentioned one of them. I thought, though, that game could have easily gotten out of control. I think that it could have easily careened into Florida rolling over Kentucky. The game was at the Swamp. I mean, it was, again, one of these amazing atmospheres that we've seen now 2 weeks in a row there. But I thought defensively, they were really, really tough. I thought, and Will Levis obviously had that great, 60 yards in the air throw. But yeah, I thought you saw a lot of what these NFL scouts talk about when they talk about Will Levis. You see a lot of the maturity and the growth in his game. I just thought it was a really hard-earned win for Florida, and to do it on the road. You open the show by saying for Kentucky to be beating Florida regularly, that is just a very weird world that we are in, and obviously certainly says a lot about what Mark Stoops has built. But they were coming into this. This was the team that we thought coming into the season was the best Kentucky team that we've seen in a while. They came in with these preseason rankings and this hype and all this stuff that we hadn't seen out of this program in a long time. And we all got enamored in Florida, what we saw last week. And the week 1 Heisman and everything we saw at Anthony Richardson. But I think this was a statement for Kentucky to say, no, we have built this. We are not going anywhere. And we are that team that you thought we are. Really good defensive team. Really tough. We're going to be super physical. We're going to make it really, really hard to get any yardage. And you saw that with Anthony Richardson himself, that he could not get anything going because
he had 4 rushing yards. 4. So to put this in perspective, Kentucky went from 1987 to 2017 without beating Florida. They have now beaten Florida 3 times in the last 5 years. And this is the first time they've won 2 in a row against Florida since 1976 and 1977. And this isn't one of those weird made-up stats where they didn't play. They've played every year. That was – it is a big deal. And by the way, Mark Stoops, congratulations to him because he breaks Bear Bryant's record for all-time wins at Kentucky. So also puts Steve Spurrier in another place in the record book because Bear Bryant was the all-time winningest coach at Kentucky and Alabama, but now he's only the all-time winningest coach at Alabama. And Steve Spurrier now the all-time winningest coach at Florida and South Carolina. So he's the only one who's the all-time winningest coach at 2 SEC programs.
I think anytime you beat Bear Bryant in something or pass him in a record book,
Doing all
usually a
right.
good sign. Yeah.
And big week for Mark Stoops, by the way. So a son of Youngstown, Ohio. Now the Stoops brothers went to Iowa to play football, but they are sons of Youngstown, Ohio, and the Youngstown State Penguins are coming to Lexington next week. And Mitch Barnhart was standing in the back of the press conference room, and Mark Stoops was asked about that game next week, and he said, "Oh, a lot of Youngstown's coming. I don't think Mitch is going to be ready for this." So, and it's funny because it would have been kind of perfect for him to break that record against Youngstown State, against his hometown team. But this is probably more fitting and more accurate to describe what he's done at Kentucky. The fact is, when he got the job, the idea of even sniffing a win against Florida was just a pipe dream. And here they are beating them 2 years in a row, 3 of the last 5. Like this is a program that expects to be at the top of the SEC East, expects to compete with Georgia. We'll see if they can or not. But I just, you hear Ari and I gush a lot about Mark Stoops, say he's got the best job in America. He's really good.
Yeah, it's not just like handed to you as the best job in America. You make it the best job in America.
He absolutely
and you
made
build
it that
that
way.
Job security. I know this isn't winning at the same level, but I want to make sure that before we ever end this podcast that we give these specific shout outs, because one of the things that I love about Kentucky and the story and what Mark Stoops has done is that it bucks against tradition, and it goes against like a history of not having that success. And so I put this in the doc, need to get it out. We talked a little bit about Kansas. They beat West Virginia. So Kansas is 2-0. Rutgers is 2-0. Syracuse is 2-0. Duke is 2-0. That is cool. That is just really cool. And like, I love that there is a season where all of these teams that are historically not very good at college football are 2-0.
Well, and also that Kansas win in overtime in the rain against West Virginia. Did Stuart Mandel speak this into existence? Remember, he predicted 3 Big 12 wins this season for Kansas.
Oh, he must be really cocky right now.
And by the way, they played Duke. They got a Duke game coming up too.
Hey, Duke is better. Duke is good. 2-0.
Duke looked great against Northwestern.
They looked great. You got a little dicey towards the end, but they have looked great.
Before we get too far away from Florida, Kentucky, I do want to shout out one of the greatest names in college football because he was outstanding in the second half of that game. Kavosiey Smoke, the running back from Kentucky, was out. Remember, Chris Rodriguez suspended. He's a 6-yard carry guy. And Kavosiey Smoke was running into walls for a half on Saturday night and then just kept going. And then offensive line got better as the game went on. And so congratulations to Kavosiey Smoke, who my first experience with him was in 2020. I covered the Kentucky-Auburn game at Jordan-Hare. Smoke Monday was playing for Auburn, and I posited that if Smoke Monday were to ever tackle Kavosiey Smoke, it would mean that a new pope had been selected.
I was going to say, is there like an SEC bylaw that someone needs to be named Smoke on one of the teams because it's just too good of a football name to not?
The SEC has Kavosiey Smoke, which is his real name. It's birth certificate name. But in terms of nicknames, they got Rocket Sanders at Arkansas. They got Squirrel White at Tennessee. They got Kool-Aid McKinstry at Alabama. It's a good year for nicknames in the SEC.
And real name, Bumper Pool. Or is that a nickname? Is Bumper
no, that's his real name.
I was going to say it's listed as that in his bio. So I hope it's his real name.
No, that's his real name. And apparently his dad enjoyed the game of Bumper Pool.
I love it. But there are some really great names. But I like the idea that there's like always a smoke. Like there's someone who, you could say like, you don't want that smoke. Oh, yeah. Any given year in the SEC.
It's tremendous. Nicole, how do we recover from this? Like, we're going to have a lot of storylines through the week. The Frost thing, let's talk about that because you mentioned this at the top of the show. Do you really think they'd spend $7.5 million to fire him 3 weeks earlier?
No, I don't. I was
But do you
mostly
really? I think they
joking.
really want to, probably.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, can you really endure 3 more weeks of not moving in a positive direction, doing the same things that you've been doing, losing the same painful ways that you have? It's been embarrassing. It's been difficult. It's not been great, I imagine, as a player to live through this. I mean, these players have to get up there after the game and try to explain something that they're doing their best. They're trying their best. I mean, like, this is on the coaching staff. This is on the head coach. I feel like if they could have, or if the buyout wasn't changing so dramatically so soon on October 1st, I mean, wouldn't you have done it on the way back from Ireland? You lost a game exactly the same way that you lost
Yeah, I
all
would
of
have
these
left him in
games.
Ireland. Yeah.
But you couldn't, and now you're 3 weeks away, and it's very weirdly poetic, of course, that it's week 2 and it's Clay Helton, and he was a midseason firing himself at USC, and this may be kind of that final nail in the coffin. But I mean, it's the bio goes in half in 3 weeks. Like, you're gonna have to hang in there.
Well, I don't think they can beat Indiana on that day. Now, here's the question: did you just fire him at like mid 12:01 a.m. and not even let him coach against Indiana?
Or not let him coach the game against Indiana? I mean, that would not be fair to the players. You're not going to do that. I think you go through that game.
Oh, he's got a suspension to serve too, doesn't he?
That is a good question. Does it have to be a conference game? Is that what's happening?
No, it's like 4 days, and it can be during an off week. So they have an open date thanks to playing in week 0. But yeah, I don't know.
I just think we're headed for a couple of very awkward weeks where I think all parties understand where this is going.
I'm pretty sure he has that clause in his contract that says he has to be the head coach, or you just have to pay him his buyout. Because I think if he doesn't, and this is something that Trev Alberts might need to look into, like, he could Milton Wadhams him. He could put him in the sub basement and take his stapler.
You said, what are we going to do to like kind of unwind from this weekend? I think you personally are going to look up Scott Frost's contract and read through it and try to figure out if they can make him a janitor.
Nicole, I was trying to read through it during the commercials to see if I could find that clause, but
just some light reading late night Saturday, coming off of a crazy day of upsets, just casually looking up, buyout language.
Wouldn't that be amazing if Scott Frost is like sitting in the basement of the Hawks Center and like, Scott, if you sit here, we're going to give you $7.5 million on October 1st. If you leave voluntarily, you get nothing. And Scott Frost is just like, I had a swing line and took my stapler. It was a swing line. And then eventually he's talking about putting strychnine in the guacamole. I mean, come on.
I think that this is a pipe dream of yours that is not going to happen, but I will support you emotionally as you go through this process of looking at the contract.
I mean, I think all of Nebraska needs to know this, because these people are frustrated. Like, but I think, there's Red. Yeah, we're getting a lot of show us the dog questions in the chat.
I know, I listened, even though it was being demanded.
It was very demanding from Travis, who would not stop asking. But now he's seen the dog. He's seen. I would bring my dog in, but she is sound asleep, and she would be very mad if I grabbed her now. So, but this is going to be a really interesting and awkward next 3 weeks in Lincoln, because you know what's going to happen. Like, there's nothing he can do at this point. And it's really just going to be $7.5 million if you can survive 3 weeks of awkwardness.
And that's a lot of money. That's a big incentive to do it. And it's unbelievably awkward. And obviously they started in week 0. So this got started a week earlier. But it's just one of those situations. You're in a really tough spot. And again, I don't advocate for midseason coach changes. I think in a lot of cases they are unnecessary, especially some of the ones that are like pretty late in the year. But in this case, like, I just think it's more fair to the players to make a change, try to do something. They just keep making the same mistakes and losing these games in the same way, and it's just inexcusable for Nebraska's defense to give up over 600 total yards of offense in a game.
And they overhauled the offense. They didn't touch the defense. Like, and you knew you were losing some players on defense. So, and that defense was good last year, but it is truly amazing. Jimbo Fisher, by the way, his buyout almost $90 million. So don't feel so bad, Huskers. You're about to get a bargain.
This is why athletic directors need to negotiate a little bit better in these deals.
They're so bad at it.
It's
because
lopsided.
Jimbo Fisher, Brian Kelly, James Franklin, Mel Tucker, you ain't getting out of those deals if you're mad about them. You can get as mad as you want. Those are your coaches. So you better love them.
Yep, guaranteed money. And like, this is, again, like these places and donors and all these people, like, well, you know, it's a $20 million buyout and you need to do it for Willie Taggart or whatever. People are finding that money, right? But yeah, these are bad financial deals. These ADs get fleeced in a lot of cases, and it really does limit what you're able to do. I mean, think about why Scott Frost came back this season. It was over the $7.5 million. And again, they gave him a long leash. He is the favorite child or fair-headed child, whichever metaphor I'm trying to think of. But you know, it is dollars and cents. And if you didn't put yourself in these situations, or if Bill Moose didn't extend Scott Frost when he hadn't accomplished anything, you're not in these situations in the first place. So that's just my
when no one is trying to hire your head coach away, don't give him any more money. We'll start with that. That's a nice, simple rule to follow, a nice rule of thumb. If no one is actively trying to hire your head coach, you don't have to give him any more money. He won't leave.
Yes.
So don't
negotiate against yourself for no reason. That is a good lesson to come out of this weekend. I think the other thing is to celebrate the Sun Belt, because as you know, someone who covers the college football playoff and all of the developments around expansion, it can be exhausting to think about the sport in a prism through the playoff only. And so I love that we are spending a Saturday night at almost 2 a.m. talking about the Sun Belt and the success that the Sun Belt East has had, and these programs and the way that they added them, and App State sustained success, and all of these things, Marshall's history. That stuff matters, and we should come out of this weekend appreciative that these types of games and these upsets happen, and that is what we love about college football Saturdays, not knowing that we would come out of this weekend talking about the Sun Belt.
I love it too. I love that it is 1:30 in the morning on the East Coast. I am watching BYU and Baylor knock the crap out of one another, and they're still tied, and there's just 2.5 minutes to go. What a sport. What a sport, Nicole. Thank you so much. We will see you on Thursday, you and I will see each other on Thursday as we record Friday's show. There will be some Bijan Mustardson consumed.
Oh, I'm glad you have it now. So I also have mine. I'm not going to have the whole bottle, but I will make a turkey sandwich and eat it while you guys eat your bottles of mustard.
Well, you and Ari are going to need to talk while I consume mustard. So that's
deal.
All right. It's a pleasure, guys. Who has it better than us? Well, maybe JJ McCarthy, because now he's starting, but nobody.
Jim Harbaugh would say nobody. He said that he basically played a perfect game, and that's how he got the starting job. So I think that Jim Harbaugh is feeling pretty good as well about that.
That's exactly right. So, you know, Red Auerbach is feeling the best, but that's really neither here nor there. Thanks so much. We will talk to you again soon. This show is brought to you by Sling TV, the TV you'll love at a price you'll love. Check out sling.com for special offers.